What kind of mother puts her baby into a river and lets the current carry him away? Not because she didn't love him, because she loved him enough to trust God more than her own arms. This is the story of Moses, a baby marked for death, a prince living a lie, a man who ran from everything, and an 80-year-old shepherd who believed his life was already over. For most of his life, one sentence followed him: "You don't belong anywhere." Not fully Egyptian, not accepted by his own people, not sure who he really was. But what if the place you feel most rejected is the exact place God chooses you from? Stay with this story, because before it ends, you will see a mother let go of her child to save him, a brotherhood turn into rivalry, a nation brought to its knees, and a man who finally learns he was never forgotten. If you've ever felt lost, not enough, or too broken for purpose, this story is for you. Egypt was powerful, but Egypt was afraid. The Hebrew people were growing, families multiplying, hope spreading. Pharaoh saw danger where God saw promise. So he gave an order that turned the Nile into a grave. Every Hebrew baby boy must die. Soldiers moved through the streets with torches. Doors slammed open. Crying filled the night. Inside one small home, a mother held her baby close, Jochebed. She had hidden him for 3 months, 3 months of silence, 3 months of praying no one would hear him cry. But the soldiers were close now, too close. She looked at her son, 3 months old, soft cheeks, eyes calm and trusting. He didn't know the world wanted him gone. She had prepared something in secret, a basket, carefully woven, covered so it would float. Not just a basket, a tiny ark. Her daughter Miriam stood nearby, trembling. "Mama!"
We don't have time.
She held her baby tighter. How do you place your child into a river and walk away? But sometimes love does the hardest thing. She kissed his forehead again and again. "God of Abraham, watch over my son." She placed him into the basket, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. He didn't want to let go. Neither did she. But she opened her hand. The basket touched the water. For a moment it stayed near. Then the current carried it away. Jochebed collapsed into the reeds, holding back a scream. Miriam followed the basket from a distance, step by step. The river carried the child toward Pharaoh's palace, toward danger, toward destiny. A helpless baby, floating on a river of death, held only by the mercy of God. Morning light touched the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe. Then she heard crying. She pushed aside the reeds and saw the basket. Inside, a baby, a Hebrew child, one her father had ordered to die. But when she looked at him, her heart softened. He wasn't a threat. He was a child. "He will live," she whispered. "I will call him Moses, because I drew him out of the water." From a distance, Miriam stepped forward. "My lady, should I find a woman to nurse him?" "Yes," the princess said. Miriam ran home. Jochebed entered the palace trembling. They placed the baby in her arms, her son. but she could not cry, could not reveal the truth. She was only a servant here. She nursed him, sang to him, held him close at night, and when the time came, she had to give him back again.
The time has come. Be safe, my son.
Moses grew up
He will
in the
be.
palace. Gold, education, power, respect. He had everything except belonging. He lived between two worlds, Egyptian by upbringing, Hebrew by birth, never fully either. And in the palace he found a brother, Pharaoh's son. They trained together, fought side by side, laughed like true brothers. "We'll rule together one day," the prince said. Moses believed him, but destiny was waiting. One day, Moses walked beyond the palace walls. He saw Hebrew slaves working under the sun. Whips cracking, backs bleeding, voices crying out. He had seen it before, but this time he truly saw. An Egyptian guard beat an old Hebrew man who had collapsed from exhaustion. Something inside Moses snapped. He ran forward. He shoved the guard. In anger and confusion, he struck him. The man fell, hit the ground, did not move again. Silence. Moses stared at his hands. A Hebrew man nearby had seen everything. Moses turned, desperate for understanding, but the man said coldly, "You live in the palace. You are not one of us." The words hit harder than any weapon. Pharaoh heard what happened, from prince to fugitive, from someone to no one. He ran into the desert, and for 40 years he disappeared. The desert stripped everything away. No palace, no power, no identity. Just silence. Moses became a shepherd in Midian. He married, had a son. Years passed. 40 years. He tried to forget Egypt, tried to forget the past, tried to believe his life was small now. Then one day, he saw a fire that didn't burn out. A bush burning, but not consumed. "Moses, Moses." He froze. "Take off your sandals. You are standing on holy ground." God had been watching all along. "I have seen the suffering of my people. I am sending you to Pharaoh."
Go to Pharaoh and bring them out.
Moses shook his head. "I ran away. I failed. I can't speak well. Send someone else." The answer came softly. "I will be with you." At 80 years old, his real story was just beginning. The road back to Egypt felt heavier than the desert ever did. Every step Moses took toward the city was a step toward the life he had run from. The palace gates appeared on the horizon, tall, white, unchanged. But Moses was not the same man who had left. Once he had run through these gates with fear. Now he walked through them with a staff and a message from God. "Let my people go." The throne room was vast, gold pillars, incense in the air, guards standing like statues, and on the throne sat Pharaoh, older now, hardened,
crowned with
Brother, do you
power.
not remember our
The
joy?
boy who
That was the
once
past,
raced
it means nothing
chariots
now.
beside Moses was gone. Only a king remained.
So, you return to my court, Moses.
No embrace, no welcome, just distance. You left without a word, he continued. You killed one of my men and vanished, and now you stand here demanding I release my slaves? Moses' voice shook at first, but he spoke. He says,
Let his people go.
so they may worship him. Pharaoh stepped down from the throne slowly, each step echoing across the floor. For a moment, his eyes softened. I called you brother, he said. I would have given you anything. The word brother hung in the air. Then his face hardened again. No. The sound echoed like a door slamming shut. And with that, Egypt's long night began.
At first, Pharaoh laughed. Your God, he mocked. Who is this God that I should obey him? But then the Nile turned to blood. The river that gave Egypt life became a river of death. Fish floated to the surface. The water smelled of decay. People searched desperately for clean water. Pharaoh's heart did not change. Frogs filled the land, into beds, into ovens, into homes. Still he refused. Gnats rose from the dust. Flies covered everything. Livestock died in the fields. Boils spread across skin. Hail shattered crops. Locusts devoured what remained. Darkness fell over Egypt for 3 days, a darkness so thick it felt heavy. No one moved, no one spoke. Yet Pharaoh would not surrender. Each plague was a warning, a chance to humble himself. But pride can be louder than pain, and Pharaoh's pride was deafening.
Then came the final warning. Moses stood before Pharaoh one last time. He spoke quietly. This is what the Lord says. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the palace to the prison, from the rich to the poor. Moses did not speak with anger. He spoke with grief. He knew what this meant. He knew the weight of it. Pharaoh turned away. Leave, he said coldly. Next time I see you, you will die. Moses walked out of the palace slowly. He did not look back. Outside, he broke down. He knew what night was coming, and it did not feel like victory. It felt like sorrow. God gave the Hebrews instructions. Each family would sacrifice a lamb, place its blood on their doorframes, stay inside. That night, death would pass through Egypt, but the homes marked with blood would be spared. It was a sign of protection, a sign of mercy. Still, it was a heavy night. Moses did not sleep.
Midnight came. The air felt still, too still. Then it began. A cry, then another, then thousands. Across Egypt, mothers woke to find their sons gone, from the poorest homes to the palace itself, even Pharaoh's son. The king who had refused to bend finally broke. He sent for Moses in the darkness. Go, Pharaoh said, his voice hollow. Take your people. Take everything. Just go. There was no triumph in Moses' heart, only sorrow. Some victories feel like funerals. Before sunrise, the Hebrews left Egypt. Hundreds of thousands, men, women, children, carrying what little they owned. For the first time in generations, they were free. But freedom felt unfamiliar, uncertain. They walked into the wilderness, trusting God to lead them. Then, one day, the ground began to shake. Dust rose in the distance. Chariots. Pharaoh had changed his mind. The army was coming. Panic spread through the people. The sea stood in front of them, the army behind them, trapped. "Why did you bring us here?" they cried to Moses. "Were there no graves in Egypt?" Moses stood facing the water, staff trembling in his hand. "I am not enough," he whispered. Then came the quiet reminder in his heart. You were never meant to be enough alone. He lifted the staff. Wind roared across the sea. The water split. Walls rose on both sides. Dry ground appeared. The people ran forward, through the impossible. When the last of them reached the other side, the waters returned. Silence. Freedom. Real freedom. The water became calm again, as if nothing had happened, as if it had never opened. On the far shore, the people stood in silence, breathing hard, looking back at the sea that had almost been their grave. They were alive, free, for the first time in 400 years. Chains were no longer on their wrists. No overseers, no whips, no Pharaoh. Just wind, open sky, and the sound of their own freedom. Then someone began to sing. It was Miriam, Moses' sister, the same girl who had once watched a basket float down a river. Now she stood with a tambourine in her hand. "Sing to the Lord," she cried, "for he has triumphed gloriously." One voice joined her, then 10, then thousands. A nation sang on the other side of fear. But Moses did not sing right away. He stood apart, staring at the sea. The wind moved gently across the water. He thought about the journey, the mistakes, the running, the doubt. How did a baby in a basket become the man standing here? Only God could write a story like this. That night, the camp rested under the stars. Fires flickered. Families slept. Children dreamed of freedom they had never known before. Moses walked alone along the edge of the camp. Then he heard slow footsteps behind him. An old woman approached, her back bent with age, her hair silver in the moonlight, her eyes full of something he recognized but could not name. She stopped in front of him. "I used to sing to you," she said softly, "in the palace when no one was listening." Moses' heart stopped. Jochebed, his mother. All those years, all those nights hearing a distant lullaby, it had been her. "I watched you grow," she whispered. "I wanted to tell you the truth. I wanted to call you my son. But I stayed silent so you could live." Moses stepped closer. His voice broke. "I remember the song. I didn't know why it felt like home, but I remember." She reached out with trembling hands. He took them gently. "I know, Mama," he whispered. For the first time in his life, he said the word out loud, "Mama." She leaned into him and began humming the same lullaby she had sung when he was a baby in the palace. The river had taken him away once, but God had brought him back. Mother and son, after a lifetime apart, finally together. Moses sat outside his tent later that night, looking at the stars. 80 years he had spent most of his life believing he didn't belong, believing he was disqualified, believing his failure defined him. But now he saw clearly. God had been there in every chapter, in the basket, in the palace, in the desert, in the fire, at the sea. Even when Moses ran, God did not. Even when Moses doubted, God still called his name. He realized something powerful. God does not choose people because they are perfect. He chooses them because He is faithful. The story of Moses is not just about miracles. It's about identity, failure, second chances, and a God who doesn't give up on broken people. Moses was a hidden child, a confused prince, a murderer who ran, a shepherd who thought his life was over. And yet, he became the one God used to change history. He was 80 years old when his true calling began. 80. If you think you're too late, you're not. If you think your past disqualifies you, it doesn't. If you think you're not enough, you were never meant to be enough alone. God's strength shows up best in the places we feel weakest. Your weakness is not the end of your story. It might be the beginning of your purpose. So if you feel lost, if you feel unseen, if you feel like you don't belong anywhere, remember the baby in the river. Remember the shepherd in the desert. Remember the man who thought he was nothing. God knew his name, and He knows yours too.